Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's record review, the only first listen new music review show hosted by a French professor in quarantine in his basement. Today I'm going to be doing two things that are unusual. One, I'm going to be reviewing just a song. It's a 15-minute song, Murder Most Foul by Bob Dylan. That's the first unusual thing. Second thing, I'm going to be mostly negative. I don't believe in negative reviews because I think it's stupid. I think it brings down the level of discourse in our society, and I think it seeks to destroy art. And I think we need to respect artists and respect their work. But a friend of mine, Dave, asked me to review this song, and that's as good of a reason as any. So here we go. First of all, if you need to know my bona fides on loving Bob Dylan, I did a video about his concert that I saw last year. I'll put a link to it up there or there. I don't know. And I mean, what other music reviewers do you know that has a giant Canadian music store poster from Infidels? Okay? I love Bob Dylan, which is part of the reason why this song is so disappointing. This song answers a question. This song answers a question which is almost 30 years old now. The question was posed by the American artist Billy Joel. In his 1989 song, We Didn't Start the Fire, he asked this question: JFK, blown away, what more do I have to say? Well, Bob Dylan seeks to answer this question over 16 minutes of song. I put song in quotes because it's not really a song. It's a dirge. It's a slog. There's some piano, there's some keyboards, and everything that he says like this. And then here comes the next rhyme for your brother and your sis. And it just goes on and on and on. And it seeks to answer this question. JFK, blown away, what more do I have to say? This is the worst thing you can say about a song, a worthy sequel to We Didn't Start the Fire, which I would put as perhaps the worst song of all time. I'm serious. It's between that and Wonderful Tonight by Eric Clapton. I think those are the two worst songs in the history of humanity. Now let me get into this, okay? The reason that I feel this way about this song is that this song is so painfully boomer nostalgic. It's incomprehensible. My first reaction was, what is this, Forrest Gump? I mean, framing the 60s as starting with like, if I told you, okay, Bob Dylan wrote a 60-minute song about the 60s, I'd be like, okay, well, he's not going to do all the cliche things. He's not going to start with JFK, and he's not going to mention, like, the Beatles. He's not going to talk about, like, Woodstock and then end it with Altamont. I mean, that would be the most trite, hackneyed thing in the world. I mean, that would be Billy Joel-esque. But that's what he does here. He Forrest Gumps you through the world since 1963. What makes it so painful is that it's just not even very well done. There are good parts. I'll get to them later. But for the most part, it's just not well done. It's just this pastiche of lazy boomer cultural references and cliches that happen to rhyme. Throw in the towel, it's a murder most foul. I mean, come on, Bob. Bob's always done great work with cliches, and especially since his renaissance or whatever of the late 90s, he's gotten a lot lazier with his rhymes, which is okay. He's the greatest lyricist in the English language, okay? I'm not contesting that, all right? But it's just super rough. The thing that I imagine is I imagine this song in two settings. The first setting is a classroom setting where where it's like a history class in 15 years, and someone plays We Didn't Start the Fire to explain the 60s and the late 20th century to their students. And then next they put on this song, some high school with like a textbook and the lyrics all written out and explaining exactly how it happened. I mean, he makes reference to the Beatles coming. What the hell, Bob Dylan? This is the most lazy, backwards-looking take you could possibly imagine. Let's go even one step further. What do I really imagine this song is for? I imagine some baby boomer sitting in his chair, tapping his fat fingers, listening to this song, going, "Oh, I get that reference. Ooh, I get that reference. Ooh, I get that reference. I remember that. I like this. Marilyn Monroe, I remember. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. That's from Gone with the Wind." It's painfully nostalgic. And I haven't known Dylan to be, he's nostalgic for his own life. But this kind of nostalgia for America since the 60s, it's depressing. I mean, he goes through all of the music too. Like, he just says, play this and play that. And he goes through all these references. And he references the Eagles. And just as a Big Lebowski fan, having the guy who sung Man in Me praise the Eagles in a song is just too dissonant. I can't deal with it. But that's not Bob Dylan's fault. And he talks about Queen and the Eagles. And it's all mixed into these terrible, terrible rhymes like high and die and infamy and history. The murder most foul that's actually happening here, and I don't think it's going to happen. This is attempted murder. This is attempted murder most foul of Bob Dylan's own legacy. This is a person who wrote the song Desolation Row that proved you could have a 10-minute song with basically no structure at all and be completely enraptured the entire time. You could be totally with it, following the lyrics, following the flow, following everything. And at the end of that extremely long song, you wish it were 10 minutes longer. This is the writer of Pawn in Their Game. This is the guy who wrote a song about an assassination, about a murder, which actually successfully captured the spirit of the early 60s. That's the song, if you want to understand America before the Beatles, if you want to understand America before Altamont. You talking about Altamont? God damn it, Bob Dylan, this is boring. Anyways, if you want to understand, like, the 60s, Bob Dylan's already helped you understand the 60s because he wrote all of the best music in the 60s. He wrote All Along the Watchtower. If you want to understand what was happening, why do you need this backwards look? Is this some kind of like preventative thing because he's afraid his mind is going and he wants to remember people's names? So that's the attempted murder. And the thing that I fear, I'm always fearing, Bob Dylan's old, and as he says, darkness and death will come when it comes, one of the best lyrics from the song. Bob Dylan is going to die, and probably relatively soon. And when he does, it's going to be impossible. It's going to be impossible. It's going to be the worst time in American history just because of the amount of accolades from all the old boomers and all the people talking about he was our poet, he was America's genius, people out of the woodwork saying how much they love Dylan. It'll be like Prince, but 10 times worse. And what if this is the song that catches on? What if all the idiots who don't understand infidels, part of what makes Bob Dylan great is that he made infidels and he made Pawn in Their Game, okay? Like, what if, and this is a very feasible thing, Bob Dylan dies, and then they're trying to create a summary of why he's so important, and they pick this steaming pile of junk, just badly written rhymes and lazy connections and pop culture references, because that is simple enough for a generation which, back in 1989, when they all turned 40, decided that We Didn't Start the Fire was a good song. By the way, Billy Joel, yes, you did. You did start the fire. You personally started the damn fire, and your generation. So stop, we didn't do it. Yes, you did. Anyways, that's my criticism of the song. There are good parts. This is still perhaps the greatest songwriter in the English language, okay? This is still Bob goddamn Dylan. So there's parts in here that are great. What I would say for this song is when it's more explicit, it's better, and when it's more vague, it's better. Its problem is its middle ground. It's Forrest Gumpness, where it's like a first-person tale where he goes through all the different events and music of history leading you up to the modern days. When it gets very specific, it's quite interesting. You know, when he talks about the exact moment that Kennedy was shot, or there's all these very macabre details that he gives, like he talks about the autopsy and removing the brain, and it's like gross, and you just feel like, ugh, you know, like the specific references to Love Field and when exactly Johnson was sworn in. This is kind of interesting because this is an interesting historical event. There should be a song about it, right? I mean, there should be a song. There's many songs about Kennedy's assassination. This one, it gets interesting when it gets very specific. Or when it gets much more vague and poetic. So when he talks about removing the brain, but then it says you can't find the soul and they've been looking for it for 50 years, that's actually pretty interesting. That's an interesting idea. I don't know what he's saying. This is the other problem, is like, I think JFK's assassination is basically irrelevant right now. I mean, it's as relevant as Pearl Harbor, but I mean, realistically, you want to talk about a murder most foul? I don't know. This doesn't exactly feel like it's on the pulse of America. But it's okay. Maybe this is his thesis, that this is where everything started, and he kind of gets into it in the song. There's an interesting idea where he uses Wolfman Jack as a through line. Now, Wolfman Jack, if you don't know, was a very popular disc jockey in the 50s and 60s. George Lucas used him very effectively in the movie American Graffiti, which, by the way, when this song is good, it's as good as a bad imitation of American Graffiti. Doesn't matter. But the nostalgia that the baby boomer generation has for Wolfman Jack is understandable. He was a great radio personality. So I actually like this framing device because of the way that he uses it. For example, at one point he says, he makes reference to Wolfman, then he says, "Rub-a-dub-dub, it's a murder most foul." So this is great because it takes the banality of American pop music, "Rub-a-dub-dub, I was there in my tub, long about a Saturday night," right? One of the great 60s songs about taking a bath, or 50s, I don't know when it was made. So he's mixing together the sort of inanity of Wolfman Jack announcing "Rub-a-dub-dub" mixed in with the severity of JFK and his assassination. In that way, it's done well. But it's when it's in this more obscure realm, and not so just like the rest of it. It's nice, when he talks about your brother's coming, they'll be hell to pay. And then he says, what is brotherhood and what is hell? Very interesting stuff there. Like it verges away from just being a straight retelling of the events and becomes a little bit more spiritual and more interesting. And a couple of my other favorite lines from this amazingly long song, there's a party going on behind the grassy knoll. Now this is where, if I could challenge Bob Dylan, which I can't, I can't challenge you, Bob Dylan. You're one of the greatest songwriters of all time. And I'm a French professor sitting in his basement hoping that his wife doesn't start the dishwasher. The sound down here is terrible. I apologize. But this concept of the party going on behind the grassy knoll, it's like, great. This is great. This shows like the complexity of what was going on in that moment. This shows a little bit of absurdity, a little bit of strangeness. It's a little bit uncanny. It makes you a little bit uncomfortable. When the song drifts into that territory, it almost saves it from the rest of it. And it's also just funny that he used the words "Nightmare on Elm Street." I never expected a Wes Craven movie to be referenced by Bob Dylan. That makes me happy. Wes Craven is one of my favorite directors, so that's cool. And then at the end of the song, it gets kind of interesting. He talks about killing them twice, and then he talks about darkness and death coming when it will come. And then you just sort of have to forgive him. All right, Bob Dylan. You're thinking about it, and you wanted to write a little poem about JFK's death, and you did it. And it's sort of a trip through the past, a nostalgic thought to have while tapping your fat fingers on your ottoman. Not your fat fingers, you're in great shape, Bob, but most of your audience. It's okay. Maybe I can calm down. Maybe I can target all of my energy at the real enemy. "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel. The 80s were not great, people. They just weren't. Okay, so there's my review. It's just for you, Dave. I don't like giving negative reviews. I love Bob Dylan. I'm happy Bob Dylan exists. I'm happy he made this song. At least he's making this song, and at least his concerts are interesting, and at least he's trying to stay vital and alive and making weird stuff and continuing on going. Ignore that jerk earlier on in the video who's being all snarky and coming up with all these little comments about how Bob Dylan sucks. Bob Dylan rules. If you haven't listened to Infidels, by the way, if you haven't really listened to Infidels, give yourself a chance. A lot of the late 70s, early 80s, Dylan is criminally underrated. So I'm actually going to go listen to Infidels right now. Okay. Well, until next time, where I'll review a full album that I will like. There's the camera.